Swinburne University of Technology.
So today we've got, we're looking at graduate attributes, and we've got Dr. Tim Kitchen from Adobe here, and Tim is the Senior Education Advocate at Adobe. He's been working at Swinburne for a number of years, and he used to also teach as a sessional lecturer here apparently. And before that he used to be the Director of Learning at Strathcona Baptist Girls Grammar School. So I'm going to hand you over to Tim.
Thanks, John. Nice to be here, and it's nice to have met just about everyone. I haven't quite got round to meeting everyone, so it's nice to see. And we have quite a variety of people here in different sorts of areas of the university, which is terrific. So we're going to have a bit of a chat, bit of a discussion, hopefully a bit of to and froing, although I'm being recorded here and I'm the only one with a microphone. So if we have a discussion, I might have to come and give you a hug if you're going to ask the question, and we'll just see how we go like that. But I'm not going to give this guy a hug here because he's wearing the shirt that I was going to wear today. That exact shirt. As I said to him before, I literally ironed 2 shirts last night because I'm travelling to Sydney tonight, and on Sunday night I ironed 2 shirts for Monday and Tuesday. This was one and that was the other one. So I wore that one yesterday. So it's all good. Now there's some slides, some resources I'm going to be sharing with you, and the URL to get access to all the resources that I'm going to share, plus a couple of URLs that I've also put on, are available through this URL here. So it's a bit.ly short URL. So if you don't want to take any notes at all, this is probably the one note to take for the day, so you can have this as a bit of a takeaway. Then /adobe-sburn-sept15, and that'll get you access to all the resources that I'm sharing for today. And if there's anything else that you want me to add, I can add to that. So what that's going to take you to, it's going to take you to a resource on the Adobe Education Exchange. Just out of interest, who's already a member of the Adobe Education Exchange? Only 1, 2, all right. So I'm kind of hoping that we'll have quite a few extra members. I had a look last night, we have 224,000 members. 224,000 teachers who are on the Adobe Education Exchange at the moment. And I'm kind of hoping by the end of this lecture, we'll have 224,010, 15, which would be terrific to have. Now, just I'll give you a couple more seconds just to note that down. I want to play a little video. This video I'm about to play for you, some text will come up, and I often play this to students who are around about the age of about year 10 to university age, and then I ask them, what is it that you most identify out of all these little bits of text that comes up? So I want you to think about the students that you're working with, if you are working with students, maybe even your own children who are in that sort of age range, and have a think about what identifies with them, or even yourselves too, possibly. So just have a look at this little video and just see what relates to you. And the other day I had a 16-year-old boy put his hand straight away because when he read it he saw the word tool. I'm a tool, that's me. That was fun. So it was hard to see because it went really, really quickly, but what related to you or potentially your students, if anything at all? This is a way to discuss. Too quick? Wasn't that early in the morning?
We have a multifaceted approach that people in design, the breed that now exists, you need to be multi-skilled and multifaceted.
My lecture's now over. You've sort of covered the whole thing. But yeah, spot on. So for those in the recording, the response there was to be multifaceted, to be, do you want to, multi-skilled.
As a creative.
As a creative, good. And do you think that's an important thing for young people to consider their age? What if they don't see themselves as being creative? What if they've gone through their whole lives through their education system being told that they're not creative, through an education system that is set up to be non-creative, as many of them are? How do we react to students like that?
Enroll them in accountancy.
He said put them in accountancy. Now, I got in trouble the other day because normally I pick on maths teachers, but I decided for some reason I'm going to pick on accounting teachers this time. And there happened to be 4 accounting teachers and no maths teachers in the room whatsoever. So that was a waste of time. But yeah, interesting reaction. We seem to have this sort of stereotype that if you're if you're not a creative, you're going to move into those sort of non-creative type areas, which is kind of sad in a way. And it's kind of a stereotype we're trying to break, trying to realize how important creativity is right across the gamut of just about every industry, just about every part, even accounting. You don't need too creative with accounting, though. It kind of depends on what you're saying. Any other comments, thoughts before we move on?
I just think it's a bit about the definition of creativity as well, and that we have a very sort of linear approach to what creativity means as far as fine art is concerned, whereas creativity can actually be applied in multiple areas rather than just being able to draw well or, you know, paint pretty pictures.
Yeah.
So it's about applying creativity to different areas as well, rather than just the fine arts.
Yeah, that's true. And it's interesting, I speak regularly at what's called the Create World Conference, which is like the top creative educators in the creative industries get together once a year to meet in Brisbane. And in the last 2 years, I've been a keynote presenter there. And it's interesting talking to them about the concept of creativity, because in their minds, they're creative. Their whole lives are about being creative. They are artists, therefore they are creatives. And they look at other people and say, well, you say you're creative, but you're not really. You haven't spent your whole life working hard at that particular skill to be able to call yourself a creative. We're the creative ones, you're just trying. I thought, well, that's really sad. And it's also interesting when they then have a go at me for working at Adobe, because they actually don't like Adobe, because they used to love Adobe when it was all for them, and now kind of Adobe products are kind of for everyone now. And they're seeing us put in features in Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign that allow anyone to do some amazing stuff which used to take hours, which used to take incredible skill to be able to do, and now you can just do it in seconds. And they hate that, because they've spent their whole life learning how to do this sort of skill. So I was talking to my boss. I've got a boss who's based in San Francisco, and we're having this discussion about how do we talk to creatives and then the rest of us? Because she said, why don't you call it creative with a capital C, and then there's creativity. And I thought that's quite cool. So the people who their whole life is based around creativity. So the art students, the media students, the painters, the photographers, the cinematographers, the filmmakers, all of them, they're the capital C creatives. The rest of us, we can just be the normal creatives. I kind of like that, because it's true, and it's such an important thing to us to think about. There's a person who I met. I want to see if you can recognise him at all. Ever? And I had the great opportunity of meeting this gentleman when he was in Australia. Who's never heard of Sir Ken Robinson? Okay, look, I'm really pleased to be able to introduce. Don't feel bad. Every time I do ask that question, I do get a handful, but you can see most people have. In 2006, he gave us a TED Talk. You know what TED Talks are? Yep. It was his first of 3 TED Talks. There's not many people in the world who have done 3 TED Talks, but he has. And if you want to spend 20 minutes of your life in a quality sort of time, if you've got a spare 20 minutes, go to TED.com or to YouTube and look up Sir Ken Robinson. 2006 TED Talk, his first one. It is amazing, and it kind of started the discussion. It really stimulated the whole thought leadership on the importance of creativity in education. And since then, it's become, I suppose, a fairly common thing. We're having conferences now focused on creativity in education. It's become a hot topic to be talking about. I guess it has been for a long time, but Sir Ken really put it on the agenda, which is terrific. And we spent some time with Sir Ken doing some one-on-one interviews with him, just between you and me and the people who are watching the recording here. He charges $50,000 per gig, plus 2 first-class airfares, obviously if it's overseas and so on. And he hardly ever gets to this part of the world because he is so busy. Like, he is just full on. So we were very pleased to actually interview him in our headquarters in San Jose, California. He lives in LA, so didn't charge $50,000 just to go up to San Jose. But we did this series of interviews with him just to get a little bit more thought about what it is that he's really thinking in terms of creativity. And if you want to have a look at these series of videos, they're all on YouTube, they're all available to you. If you just look up Sir Ken Robinson and Adobe, and you'll see the full list there. But I just want to play this one to you, just to get you thinking. I just love listening to his voice. I don't know if he's right or not, but I just love listening to him. I was talking to a group of Americans about him recently, and they said, oh yeah, we just love the way he sounds. His accent is just amazing. No idea what he's talking about, but he just sounds so good. I thought that's really interesting. And I was talking to this gentleman here, Stephen Heppell. I don't know if you've come across his work. I actually had the pleasure of spending 2 whole hours one-to-one with Stephen Heppell, Professor Heppell from the UK. Whoops, let's jump back to him. In Singapore last year. And he says, Sir Ken raises all these issues, all these problems. And he goes around the world talking about all the issues with education and so on. He doesn't give us solutions. And so what Stephen Heppell does is he follows Sir Ken around the world and literally comes up with solutions. And he's had some really amazing ones, which I'll talk about some of those, some of the ones that I can talk about, we can quickly chat about. So I just might turn that down while the buzz is there. But just before we go on any further, what's your reaction to what Sir Ken was saying? What are some of the things that maybe come to you? Because there's quite a lot in that little speech, but some of the reactions from you guys at this point.
I was thinking there's an irony there, in the sense that the guy has to follow him around for the solutions.
Yeah.
So you've got someone spouting basically, we need ideas, great, but someone else follows him around, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a hell of an irony.
Yeah. So what are some of the problems or some of the things that come to mind when you hear Sir Ken that kind of relate to the work that you're doing potentially? Putting you on the spot here.
Putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so I don't teach for a start, so that's...
Yeah.
But
you're involved in an education institution, so you have a role.
Well,
in the
it's
process.
about creative solutions to things, realistically. So if there's a problem, you're looking for a way to do that efficiently and effectively.
Yeah.
So ideas are creativity, I think.
Yeah, and in a sense, Sir Ken is trying to push that. That's why he mentioned that study by IBM, saying that the CEOs, the people who are employing young people, I suppose, out of universities, they're looking for people who can solve problems that they don't even know are problems yet. They're looking for that creative edge. And sort of he's wondering, how are we accommodating that? How are we as an education institution supplying industry with problem solvers, with team builders, with people who can actually think outside the square? Or are we still keeping to that same traditional model of education that we've had for the last 120 years and that's just trying to push the edges of creativity? And it's an interesting discussion to have. Any other thoughts?
We had a global leadership conference last year where we worked with Northeastern University in Boston. So they all came over here and we had some keynote addresses. And they brought in one guy, I can't even remember who he was, but he's a big keynote address. He costs a fortune, and he spoke about, the school system was not working, and went on to say that his children had been homeschooled, and then it turns out later that one of them committed suicide.
Yeah.
And this was after they had gone from homeschooling into a traditional school.
Yeah.
And I guess that the model of school that we look at, it's very easy to say, okay, this bit is missing. But there are other issues that occur at schools, and we see things like socialization and the building of resilience, which is all part of working in teams.
Yeah.
Our students hate group assignments, but we tell them it's for their own good because they need to work in teams when they go out. But the first socialization process of working in teams is actually playing in the playground with other kids. And so, I mean, it's a bit rich then for places like IBM, who are very conformist. The American culture is very conformist anyway. And you're not going to get the job if you go for an interview with IBM unless you're wearing a blue suit and shirt and tie. So then to say, oh, we don't get creative people, the model actually starts with employing creative people, not employing clones of yourself.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's good discussion. Anything else? Hang on, I've got to come over to you because I'm mic'd up here.
To follow on from Barry's point there, Sutton in the Weird Rules of Creativity wrote that organisations should not get people who conform to the organisation. They have to be the ones who question everything, who actually disagree with management. So we need to make sure that our students are not yes students. They are more students who do question the norm and are not afraid to do that.
Yep, which is different to the way our education systems were initially set up.
Yes, of course.
Came out of the Industrial Revolution, that we were trying to get people away from the rural societies into industry, set them up in factories so that we could get more people into the cities and so on and so on. So to do that, we set up schools and we set up universities so we could keep that structure going. The whole concept of a teacher in the front of a room or a lecture theatre with 50 to 100 people there, it's a very dated concept. It's a concept that is very uncreative even though you can have some fantastic lecturers, you can do some incredibly creative approaches, but it's not the be-all and end-all. It should be a variety, really. As an education institution and as educators, you should be looking at the whole gamut of how modern communication takes place and how you can actually work with the software that's around to be creative, to encourage your students to be creative. I love the work of Seymour Papert from the 1960s and 70s, and he's the one that came up with the constructionist, as opposed to the constructionist learning theory, where it's all about making and doing. Now, not just in higher education, but also in primary education, early years and secondary, where the theories are there, but unless the kids are actually making something and producing something, then the learning isn't really going to that higher level. Kind of relates to what Bloom was talking about when he was doing his taxonomy of learning. At that very base level is the non-creative side, where it's the facts and the figures, it's the standardised testing, it's the exams, it's remembering a whole lot of facts to be regurgitated for a period of time. That's the base level of the pyramid. Then you go right up to the very pin of the pyramid where you've got the creativity side, where you're actually going to be remembering things for lifelong learning. And that, in a sense, is the essence of, I suppose, what education is all about, to be preparing for people for a lifelong education. And a lot of people are saying now we should be flipping that pyramid so that you're doing that creative stuff right from the start. And then if you're doing that well, they'll remember the facts and the figures for their exams later on. But we tend to be sort of so focused on the facts and the figure side of things. I tend to predominantly work in a secondary school, as I have been a secondary school teacher for most of my career, and I'm seeing that constantly. I did start off as a primary school teacher. That was my first degree, which was just brilliant because I spent 3 years learning how to be a teacher. And I spent 3 years learning about what's called the whole language approach, where when you're teaching English, you're actually also teaching maths and science and geography and history. You're not just teaching English. And then when I became a secondary teacher, oh my goodness, you just weren't encouraged to do anything other than your discipline. And then when you go into universities, it kind of manifests itself because you're just in a faculty based on your particular subject, and you're not even talking to other faculties, and often in other cases. I know there are lots of exceptions to that here, which is great. I was at UTS last year, University of Technology Sydney, where they're actually setting up degrees in creativity and getting medical students and nursing students and education students and engineering students to work together in projects to complete a second degree in creativity while they're doing their medical degree, their engineering, their nursing and their teaching degree. And I think that's just brilliant. Just incredible. It's sort of breaching out the boundaries. And it's great to see examples of that. So that's why I bring Stephen Heppell to the table, because he's doing that at an even global level, where he's setting up schools that are linking with universities. So if you're a 15-year-old girl who's passionate about maths, and you just and everything's about maths, and you suddenly discover this incredible passion, why should you have to wait until you're 18 before you can start your maths degree? Why not start it when you've got that passion, you've got that fire? So he's setting up these schools and universities so that you can do that. And same with all sorts of other disciplines, just sort of get the fire while it's there. Professor Yong Zhao, I don't know if you've come across his work, he's out here fairly regularly. He's from the University of Oregon as now this is the world's longest business card, Presidential Chair and Director of the Institute for Global and Online Education in the College of Education, University of Oregon. Whew, take a breath. So it was pretty amazing. He's published lots. And one of the books that I kind of highly recommend to educators to read if they get a chance, anyone who's actually working with young people, is this one here called World Class Learners, where his focus is on trying to encourage young people to think globally, to think entrepreneurially, to think about what their passions are now so they could potentially turn those passions into a job in the future. Because there's no guarantee they're going to get a job when they leave university. And maybe there was for us, but these days it's totally different now. So it's about preparing global creativity and entrepreneurial talents. And this is a young boy that I met with. I was doing a presentation at an education conference, and he was the keynote speaker before me. And he came up, and the first thing he said was, "Hi, everyone should learn to code." And he was talking to a whole lot of teachers, predominantly primary school teachers, which was interesting at this particular conference. And because you can imagine the shuffle and the hesitance and the teachers going, "What does he mean? What's code?" Like, it was really interesting statement to start with, everyone should learn to code. And then he explained why, and he explained his story. He's only 17 now. He was 16 when he gave this speech. And he said, when I was in grade 6, I taught myself how to code. I wasn't encouraged to by my teachers or my parents. I just looked it up on YouTube, and I looked it up and I just learnt myself, because I really wanted to build myself an app. I really wanted to sort of see what I could actually do with this type of technology and actually create something. And then I wanted to make some games. So he had this motivation. So he taught himself the process of coding. By the time he was 15, he was the CEO of his own company called App and Away. Like, wow. And now he's 17 and he travels around Australia on the speaking circuit talking about the importance of coding and how every student should learn to code, and coding should be a subject in primary and secondary school that should be compulsory. Now, I'm not sure if that'll ever happen, but at least it's nice to see that he's got that drive and he's got that passion. He had to stop doing his secondary school education at his Christian college in Brisbane, or just out of Brisbane I think it was, but he's still doing his QCE, Queensland Certificate of Education, while he's doing his computer science degree. So he's worked a way around it so he could do it. And he's a classic example of someone that I wonder, after 23 years in the classroom myself, how many of those kids did I have? How many of those kids was I inspiring through that? How many do we have in universities that are just, you know, dying to get out there and show what they can do and set up their businesses? But are we sort of helping them, or are we hindering them with the processes that we've got in place? The companies that are considered the best workplaces, it's an interesting study that BRW do every year. They rate, and I'm not sure how they rate it. I think they get employees to do surveys and so on. I haven't seen one myself, but they have this top 10 companies to work for. What I found interesting, with the top 10 companies in Asia to work for, 5 of them are all IT focused. Interesting concept. And when I show that to young people, they go, oh wow. I think, well, maybe IT is something that you should be thinking seriously about. If it's like the top 10 places to work for are totally IT, and you look at the ones that aren't in the top, or who are in the top 10 but aren't in those 5 of IT, they are solely reliant on IT. IT is just such an important part of our world. And I sort of challenge teachers and students, universities, are we making sure that our students are getting those IT skills to be able to potentially work in these companies, or potentially getting ready for the commercial business side of things? There's a fantastic YouTube clip that I want to play you that gives you an example of being creative, thinking outside the square. So this is Honda, and this was an ad. Has anyone seen this before? Yeah, seen it? So you know what's going to happen? This is just blew me away. One of my students showed it to me a while ago, and I thought, I just couldn't believe how they did it. I kind of worked out how they've done it in the technology side of it. I know that they used Adobe software for it. I just thought I'd throw that one in there. But it's pretty incredible. So what I'm going to do is just going to jump to that URL. And hopefully everything will work nicely for me. If you do a search for Honda, the other side, you'll be able to get a copy of this if you want to show this to your students. So it's a commercial. Like many car commercials, double-sided story, and then there's a little instruction for you. It says, or have I missed it? No, I've missed it. I'll just pause it for a sec. Oh, there he is. Press and hold the R key to see the other side. Okay, so let's keep playing it. I'll press the R key. Oh, I'll let go of the R key. I'll press the R key. How clever is that? Like, to think about that, to think about the technology that we've got available to us today, to be able to put something like that together, and how you match them up, and how you got that it almost perfectly matched up. I mean, it still blows me away about how much detail was put into doing that. And of course, they won a whole lot of awards for it and so on. It became a huge thing for them. But it's a classic example of what industry is looking for. They're looking for people who have got creative ideas so they can sell their products, I suppose. But, you know, I guess that's the way of the world. I had a huge internal battle coming from an education background, then working for a commercial company like Adobe, thinking, I'm not a salesperson, never been. I've been an educator all my life. And then Bruce Dixon, I don't know if you've come across Bruce, he was a similar vein educator, and then he set his own business, and very much the leader in one-to-one computing and education around Australia and now in America as well. And he said to me, don't be embarrassed by the fact that Adobe is a sales company, the fact that Adobe is a commercial business. The fact that they do make money means that they can build this amazing software and encourage students to be incredibly creative and teachers to be creative. So that is what's really, really good about the company. I mean, sure, it's a business, and you can't deny that, and the fact that you've now moved from an educator to this commercial business. But and when he made that, so I realised, yeah, okay, there's a relevance there, and most of the students I engage with will be going into commercial businesses or setting up their own commercial businesses. But as an educator, we kind of shy away from that. Like, I had this reluctance, I had this sort of hesitation. Is my reputation going to be tarnished because now I'm working for a commercial business, as opposed to being this educator that's sort of known at Strathcona anyway. So it was an interesting dilemma to go through. Some of the research that we've done recently, this is sort of research we did last year into this whole issue of creativity. The first few stats I want to show you are based on a survey that we gave with over 1,500 educators. So this is from an education perspective. And the question, the main overarching question was, what is the importance of creativity in education? And the details of this particular survey can be found at that URL at the top if you want to access it. You've got that URL start, so you can grab it later on. But let's go through some of the main findings. First statement, creativity expression is a must. We had 97% of the educators, and this is throughout Asia Pacific, agreeing that creative tools actually help the learning process. So the statement was, creative expression for students is a must regardless of the course. And there's the breakdown of strongly agree to agree. Next main finding, the use of creative tools enhances a student's conceptual understanding. And we had an interesting breakdown there of strongly agree to agree. Next main finding, the current education system does not place enough emphasis on creative expression. We did ask them for a disagree and not sure and strongly disagree, but it's fascinating to see such a strong swing towards strongly agree and agree with all these statements. Basic digital media skills are essential for 21st century workforce. Look at those stats. This is coming from the educators, so it's out there as an important issue for the education world. Students proficient in digital media skills have a better chance of being recruited. From an education perspective, there's the mix of strongly agree to agree. You can work out how many people disagreed just by looking at that. And that was interesting to get an educator's point of view, and we thought, that's great, but let's find out what industry really want. We heard what Sir Ken Robinson was saying from that study at IBM, so we did our own study. We don't do the studies, we sponsor the studies, and we get professional research companies to actually do it, so it's legit, rather than saying Adobe's done all of this sort of thing, because there's a huge bias there, obviously, if Adobe's doing the research itself. But this was 1,069 hiring managers being asked questions about what are the skills that you're wanting from young people as they're coming out of universities and schools. And rather than giving you the stats, I want to play this little infographic, which was produced by Adobe After Effects. I just thought I'd throw that one in there too, to give you a nice creative way of giving you the findings. We'll go through some of the details of that particular study in a minute, but before we do, is there anyone who wants to sort of say anything or maybe contradict those facts from your own experience, or do you see that as being important? Is this something that's new for you guys? Any sort of comments or thoughts?
I had a question, Tim. In terms of creativity, how are graduates or candidates, how do they actually demonstrate creativity to the potential employer? So are they talking about at a job interview they're supposed to present something that they've been working on, or like is it a case study that they've been involved in, or a project? Yeah.
Good question, John. In fact, I'm going to show you a couple of examples of resumes that have been incredibly successful that answer that exact question in a sec. So I might just hold that for a minute. Yeah. But it's a whole discussion, so it's a whole lecture in itself when you go into it. So yeah, good thought, but we'll get onto that in a sec. Any other thoughts, comments?
Yeah, a couple. I mean, we did a study, actually, a PhD student and I, where we spoke to the designers of luxury hotel rooms in the States, and we spoke to all the major companies, and we did a Delphi study with them, and we asked them what they felt were the major things driving customers' experiences now and in the future. And what came out in the first round was technology. Technology is going to be really, really important in the future. So then we fed back some of that study to them and asked them a series of other questions about where they were going to invest their money. None of it was going to be invested in technology.
Interesting, yeah.
So we were saying in 2020, is this going to be important? Yes, it is. What are you investing in? And so there's a difference there between a spouse theory in terms of saying what they believe is important.
Yep.
And, you know, even in your survey there, I noticed that, you know, they said this was important in the organisation, but are they hiring those creative people?
Yep.
There was a joke I heard last week, which I thought was interesting, where somebody was at an interview and they were asked, what's your weakness? And they said, honesty. And the guy behind the desk said, I don't really think that's a weakness. And the candidate said, I don't give a damn what you think.
Can I use that? That's great.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Because they're being somewhat creative.
Yeah, true. Yeah, no, good point. Good point. So, yep.
The survey on the educators, were they third level educators or primary, high school educators, or a combination? They
were, from memory, I have to go back and find out exactly, but from memory they were mainly higher ed.
Okay.
Because that was pretty much the audience we were catering for at that time. Mm-hmm. It was early last year. It was leading towards our APAC forum, which is predominantly higher ed, but I wouldn't mind betting that some K-12 were involved in that as well. No primary though. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I've come from Ireland just recently.
I can tell.
Where I've looked at entrepreneurship education, which includes obviously creativity, innovation, etc. I see the problem of the trainers don't have the education to convey to the students. So even though the output we expect is creativity, innovation, we haven't trained the trainers.
That's right. Yep.
So that's why I was interested to find out if it was high school, secondary level, because I talked to one of the leading institutions in Ireland about getting entrepreneurship or creativity as part of the curriculum, and I was told, well, we'd have to drop shorthand.
Yeah.
But I won't.
Yeah.
And like my answer was, who in God's name teaches shorthand now to teachers? Yeah. But you know, I think we need to go to the grassroots and then the conveyors of the education to make sure they're upskilled enough to get candidates up to that level.
Yep, good point, absolutely. I'm very pleased to tell you that the new Australian curriculum, which is almost an Australian curriculum, the new version of the Australian curriculum, which now every state has their own different version of, it has creativity as a fundamental aspect to it. And when I show that to teachers from outside Australia, they go, "You're serious?" Because it's all about literacy and numeracy in our curriculums, but creativity and also ICT are two fundamental key, what do they call it, key components of it. And it's all based around what's called the Melbourne Declaration, which came out in 2008, which was all about how every learner needs to be creative. And
but my point was, is the Australian government then providing the means by which the educators are being educated on that? It's
absolutely.
Great having it in the document, but if they can't deliver on that, we can't obviously have a suite of
and their response will be, well, at least it's in the policy, and then it's up to you to actually implement it, thinking, yeah, okay. And that's the challenge that we have. And that's kind of why I do what I do in terms of showing you the options and showing what's available to help educators encourage people to be creative and so on, and looking at some of the standard creativity tools that are used around the world and see how can we apply those in the classroom. So that's why we've got a whole gamut, which we'll touch on in a minute to give you some of those. But here are just quickly some of the stats from that same survey that came through. Expectations increasing for candidates to be tech-savvy, digitally sophisticated and creative. When I show this to students, I say, digitally sophisticated, it doesn't necessarily mean taking 20 selfies every hour. It's about actually coding. It's about not just watching movies, but making movies. It's about not just playing games, but making games. And they're the sort of things we're kind of encouraging young people to consider. Problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, innovation, and technical specialist skills will be most in demand over the next 12 months, as you were saying. I was going to quickly flip through these. You can look at these in your own time if you want to. Students should develop a wide range of skills, as you were saying before, and focus on creativity to set themselves apart. That kind of concept of trying to brand themselves, which is a challenge for a lot of students. I get to speak to a lot of geeks as such, a lot of coders, kids who just are passionate about coding. And then I say, well, it doesn't really matter how good you are at coding if you can't promote your skills to other people. I often do a little survey to a group of kids and say, how many of you prefer to be in front of a computer than in front of a person? Oh, yeah, oh, absolutely. And all these hands go up and say, that's great, but you need to develop people skills. And I ask, how many of you are designers and definitely not coders? And all these hands go up and I say, well, that's great, but go and have an appreciation of what coding's about too, because you really need to find that balance. And even if you're not going to become a coder, at least appreciate what coders can do for you. So, this is a resume. This is a video resume that came across our desk in the States, which my boss gave me and said, you've got to look at this. And this is a classic example of being creative. This is a classic example of developing skills as a young person to be ready for industry. And this one blew me away when I saw it. And the first thing that struck me before I even played it was, what does she look like? I'm thinking, how clever is it that she's hidden her face right from the start? So there's no judgment there on her appearance. Interesting how she didn't even mention the software that she used to make this, or maybe the people that she got to help her make this. And I asked the question to young people when I show this to them, I say, what software would they have used, would she have used to get this produced? And very rarely do I get the correct answer, but every so often I do. And one boy the other day in Brisbane, he put up his hand and he said, oh, she probably would have used Premiere Pro, After Effects, Photoshop, and maybe a bit of Illustrator. I thought, wow, you get a prize, because that's probably exactly what she used to put that together. And you can see her face appears just briefly then when she brings down her Facebook profile. And I'm thinking this is a fantastic way of just standing out from the crowd and trying to sort of get yourself that position that you might like. One of our senior directors handles 100 resumes a month. Being in one of the top 10 companies to work for, we get a lot of resumes and internships and all sorts of people who want to come in and work for Adobe. But to handle 100 resumes a month, you'll like this story, I may have even told you this story before, he puts them into 3 piles. The first pile are all text-based, and they're not even read. The second pile might have a link to a blog or a website, and they're read and considered maybe they'll go for an interview. The third pile is almost guaranteed to get an interview. What do you think it is on the third pile that stands itself apart from the others? Could be. Yeah, and more focused, because that could also be on the second pile, a link to a blog or a portfolio or something. But in that third pile, it's the video. That's why we're trying to push the concept of video literacy, and video is now becoming a literacy. It's becoming almost as important to make a quality video as it is to be able to make a quality essay. And that's an interesting concept. I'm wondering how we as educators and how schools and how are they coping with that fact that it is becoming huge. YouTube has changed the way we communicate dramatically. You look at some of the stats on YouTube now, it's just incredible how much is being put up there. So this is a young intern that we've got currently in San Jose in our main office. I met her 3 weeks ago, very impressed by her, and this case study just came out last week about her and how she got to become an intern at Adobe and what skills she's developing while she's there, and yeah, I'll let it speak for itself. I had her come and speak to a group of teachers in California last month, so very recently, and all these educators are like top of the field in sort of arts and media educators. There are Adobe education leaders. They're the rock stars of that type of education. And they were blown away by this young lady and the way she was able to communicate and present herself, and it was like, to stun them was pretty hard to do because they're kind of the leaders in their field in this sort of technology. So it was a classic example of someone who's really going out there. So just to qualify, those are the 3 stats that came out of that survey. 88% of these hiring managers saying tech savvy is a skill we want. 82% to be able to communicate through digital and visual media. Only 76% saying creativity, but still that's 3/4. That's a pretty good stat to sort of be aware of as the 3 biggest takeaways. And when it comes to Adobe stuff, well, all of the apps that you can see around the outside there, they're all free. They don't cost a cent. And all of them are available on iPad, iOS devices. About half of them are available on Android. All the ones in the middle, they're all the paid ones, and here at Swinburne you've got the latest. You've got the Creative Cloud on all your computers here because you've got an enterprise agreement with Adobe, which is fantastic. What you don't do that Clemson do is you don't provide it for your students as well, which is interesting that some universities are now taking that up to say not only should it be on our devices, but every student that comes here we're going to give them the Creative Cloud as well. Thinking, well, that's a huge motivator for students to come to your institute as to opposed to somewhere else. But yeah, just thought I'd sort of throw that out there that we've got around about 80 products that educators are using around the world. And yet when I do ask the average teacher, what do you know about Adobe? Acrobat, Photoshop, and that's about it. So it's interesting how there's a lot of ignorance in terms of what's available to you guys. And I mentioned at the very start about the Adobe Education Exchange. 223,000, we got over 224,000 last night. We got over that mark there of teachers who are using this portal as a way of sharing ideas, a way of doing professional learning, communicating as a global network of creative educators to come up with ideas on how we can actually work together. That's a great portal for teachers. This one's a great portal for students and teachers as well. This is our Learn and Support portal where you can click on that button and it comes up with all 100 of our products. Click on the product and you can get beginners classes to full-on master classes on every one of Adobe's products, which is pretty awesome to have just that one portal to reach out to everywhere. So you may have heard of Adobe TV and a lot of the stuff we've had in the past. All the best of that's now centralized. So that's what the Learn and Support Network is all about. And the last thing I would sort of want to mention here before we might have a bit of a chat or some questions is the certification program. We have a third-party company that looks after our certification. Exerio is the name of the company, and we have 6 exams. Now I know that the design faculty here has been looking seriously at becoming a testing centre so that anyone can go there and actually sit an exam if they're ready for it and become formally qualified in one of those 6 subjects. That looks great on their resume because when an industry is looking at placing someone, they think, oh, you've actually got an ACA or an Adobe Certified Associate qualification for Photoshop. That means you can actually use Photoshop rather than thinking, oh, you've studied design. Did you do Photoshop? Because we use Photoshop extensively in our business. We want you to make sure you've got the skills for it. And the same with Flash and Illustrator and Dreamweaver and Premiere Pro and InDesign as well. And just as we're running out of time, let me just give you a little example of where we're heading down the track. Some of the stuff you're about to see now is in prototype. Some of it actually does exist in some of our touch apps, and some of it will be about 3 or 4 years away because the technology hasn't caught up yet. I'm happy to hang around for a little while if you want to actually play with some of the stuff, you want to ask some questions. I know we're just about out of time, but we've got maybe 2 minutes if there's any sort of questions or discussion you want to have that's brief.
Just want to get your insights in terms of colleagues in design. You can see where students who come into design courses come sometimes with high school portfolios and things like that. But in terms of business education, where do you see Adobe and Creative fitting in?
For business education, so the question was, there's obvious solutions in the design areas and so on for Adobe and so on, but where do we fit into the business side of things is pretty much what the question was. We're finding that that businesses are needing to branch out in all sorts of different communication areas. So for instance, video literacy, I mentioned, and all of that. I used to run a TV studio at Strathcona, and we'd have business people come in, parents, fathers of and mothers of the students come in and say, oh, we need this in our company. this is what we need, because we're so sick of spending thousands of dollars on marketing agencies and graphic design organisations to come and do stuff for us, and we don't really like it anyway. We want to do it in-house. So a lot of stuff is now happening in-house, and businesses do marketing and sales and so on. So that's one factor in it. So to have those sort of skills in-house is great. Just simple things like Adobe Acrobat Pro, to be able to manipulate PDF documents. Not just make PDFs, but to manipulate them. That is an incredible advantage to have in a small business or a large business and so on. There's lots of other things coming to mind, because we have a whole side of Adobe which is called the Marketing Cloud. It's actually our largest employee. We've employed more people into the Marketing Cloud than we have into the media or the Creative Cloud as a sort of traditional side that we've been talking about today. And that's all about data analytics. And businesses are all about data analytics now. So when you set up a website, it's not just creating this brilliant looking website, it's what you do with the people who have entered your website and how you market to them and so on. It's a massive part. So the banks here in Australia use Adobe as their data analytics tools. In fact, I heard a stat recently, we deal with more data analytics than Google does, which blew me away. I couldn't believe that. And then I realised, well, Google actually own a lot of the data that's put up in their servers, whereas we don't. So that's why we're the preferred data analytics solution for many small businesses and large businesses. That's just some of the things that come to mind for business. I've got some little cards that promote the Adobe Education Exchange, just so I wouldn't mind giving out to you, and also give you my card, because I'm actually changing my role title very soon, so I might need to get rid of these. Same sort of job, but just a slightly different title. So please come and get my card and also Adobe Education Exchange card, and thank you very much for your time. I'm happy to come around and show you some software if you want to. That intern that we had when she was using her finger through her resume and so on, that's called Adobe Slate. It's an iPad app and it's free, and we host it for free. And it's just brilliant, using parallel scrolling HTML5, and it's great. So happy to show you anything like that if you want to see it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, please join me in thanking Tim.
This has been a Swinburne production.